Now, each gospel writer, when he wrote his book, was intent on showing that his message was right and true, and the message was to be believed. The church called them authoritative and added that claim by adding apostles' names to them. 4 were singled out, even though there were other books with other messages floating around. Some of the later authors claiming to be the apostles, like Peter, James, Thomas, Philip, etc., were in fact not. But that wasn't a problem with the earlier gospel readers. You see, when the author of Mark wrote his gospel, which is the oldest, he felt no need to establish that his book, as opposed to the others, was the only account, for there were no others when he wrote his. So an apologist will tell you the authors of Matthew, Luke, were just continuing the gospel tradition that was started by Mark, that being why an author's name wasn't included. However, the name Mark is a nom de plume, an alias given to a scroll written in Palestine circa 50 BCE. No one knows who wrote that scroll. The name Mark was given to the scroll many years later. The writer was anonymous, and 2,000 years later, we are none the wiser to his identity. These books were widely seen in their circles as authoritative, and so the people back then didn't see the need to put their name on the message. They weren't pretending to be an apostle when they were not. The later church fathers felt the need to add authorship, possibly to make the authoritative for future generations. In John's case, the text is authorized, and this is because the author that wrote it claimed to be basing his account on the traditions passed on by the disciple Jesus loved. The author's own identity didn't matter, only that of his source. I would stress that many of the New Testament writings outside the Gospels that do name the author, some do so falsely. That is, these are writings of authors claiming to be a specific famous person, when in fact they were not. This is true of 6 of Paul's letters, as well as both the letters that go under Peter's name, James and Jude. 4 other authors, along with the Gospels, are anonymous. The book of Hebrews, which later church fathers said was written by Paul, but the author does not claim to be Paul. And 1st and 2nd and 3rd John are anonymous, but were later attributed to John, the son of Zebedee. The authorship of the Synoptic Gospels, actual identities of the writers, remain unknown. However, tradition attributes the authorship of Gospels to Matthew, tax collector and disciple of Jesus, Mark, a close associate of the Apostle Peter, and Luke, a physician and companion of the Apostle Paul. As we said before, when attributing the Gospels to authors, the church fathers wanted to believe as many as possible were written by disciples, because these Gospels would be seen as authentic. And the name Matthew was chosen for the first Gospel because of the author's fixation on the Old Testament, suggesting that he was a Jew and therefore a disciple of Jesus. And that is although it seems he used the Greek Septuagint version of the Scriptures rather than the Hebrew. Luke's Gospel was so named because the author's keen interest in Gentiles was thought to mean he himself was a Gentile. And of all the Gentiles mentioned in the Acts of the Apostles, written by the same author, only Luke seems to meet all the requirements for this evangelist. John's Gospel was so named because it was thought likely that the disciple whom Jesus loved might have been the Apostle John. Some say it could have been Mary Magdalene. The church fathers thought that it was modesty that prevented the author from using his own name in the Gospel, so they assigned it to John. However, in any case, it seemed John was written far too late to have been written by a disciple. That leaves us nothing but the fact that the Gospels were written by anonymous authors, and we are living in a very different world than that of Palestine 2,000 years ago. Look, stories of the Gospels contained are not factual. That's what's called allegory, which is fiction, but fiction which can be interpreted to reveal a hidden meaning, which is typically a moral, spiritual, or theological one appropriate for the people of the place and time. In this case, established Jewish beliefs from miracles described in the Old Testament were used and reinterpreted in a Christian setting when written into stories which were attributed to Jesus. This was presumably so the predominantly Jewish population could identify with the events that they were reading about and could understand them in the light of a more tolerant, compassionate, and understanding Christian ethos. This would have been particularly important when comparing them to the still strict orthodoxy of Judaism. In other words, the gospel were used as marketing material for Christianity, a kinder, more gentle interpretation. It is, of course, quite possible that some of these later gospels contain genuine accounts of Jesus that got lost along the way, or simply didn't fit into the narrative of earlier gospels. Now I want to finish with something from an author we can prove. Douglas Adams, who wrote The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, at one point in his story he mentions Jesus in a very agreeable way. Here's a full paragraph. And then one Thursday, nearly 2,000 years after one man had been nailed to a tree for saying how great it would be to be nice to people for a change, a girl sitting on her own in a small cafe suddenly realized that's what's been going wrong all this time. She finally knew how the world could be made a good and happy place. This time it was right. It would work, and no one would have to get nailed to anything. I think what this author was trying to say, and the reason I like it, is that it's saying it is possible to appreciate the goodness that is attributed to Jesus without buying into the religion part. Now, if we'd only take time to think about what Jesus actually said, we might live in a better world someday. Thanks for watching this and all our videos. Please like, share, and subscribe. And until we meet again, stay curious, fellow travelers, and have a great day.